waste of makeup ever. It's 10 p.m. I have had the entire day to do this review, which also there will be another review right after this, which I will look exactly the same. Because, yeah, I'm going to fill them in succession, otherwise they're not going to get done. Why is that? Well, if I don't do it now, it's not going to get done, but I am in a reading slump. So we all know I have my notes. My notes can take up pages and pages and pages. This book, this is it. This is all I have in notes because I half DNF'd this book. I probably got halfway through, and then I said, I've had enough. I'm moving forward. What is this book? Let's actually get into that. That's a great question. Maybe Once, Maybe Twice by Alison Greenberg. And I found this book because I'm trying to find book comps for my own book. I like the premise of this book, but I thought it was a huge letdown. I thought it was incredibly repetitive, and I didn't particularly like the main character. But I needed to get this stuff done, so here we are. Let's jump into it. I also know this is not my usual September lineup, but I am so far behind. And if it is not on audiobook, I'm not reading it. So hopefully next year I will be able to hop back into my September 11th books. As for now, this will just be a different kind of September for me. So let's get started. The main character of this novel is Maggie. The book jumps back and forth in time. So sometimes she's in her 20s, sometimes she's 30, sometimes she's 35. When we first meet her, she is celebrating her 30th birthday, but she's not happy about it. She's sitting down next to this guy named Garrett, who is one of her two love interests. She's not enjoying it. She has found out some kind of bad news that we do not learn for quite a while. But this news has propelled her to ask him to promise if they are not married by the age of 35 that they will get married. We end this little scene with him leaning in for a kiss, basically saying, why wait? And then we flash back. I'm gonna stop right here and say, if I were actually reading this book, I don't think I would have had as much of an issue with the flashbacks, with moving back and forth in time, because I would have had a visual for it, but I felt like it took me a minute to realize why she was different ages in the audiobook. I think part of that is absolutely me not being able to give my 100% attention to it, but I think it's also, I don't think this book needed to be formatted like this. I think this book would have better served if it were linear. Maybe start in the present and then flash all the way back. As it is, I thought it was confusing, I thought it was unnecessary, and I thought it was ineffective. The other love interest is this guy named Asher Reyes. I am Team Asher. I did not understand why she liked Garrett. I thought there was more chemistry and interest in her Asher storyline. They're both wannabe musicians, so they meet at like a karaoke night, some kind of showcase, whatever it is. He is a rock god. She's absolutely obsessed with him. Apparently, she's like a Shiksa goddess herself. She must have some magic stuff going down under, because she can get any man she wants, but apparently she can't get him to commit to her, which was one thing I found incredibly annoying, because it's not that they wouldn't, it's just that the timing was never right, and that is a trope I don't particularly care for. If that is something you like, this could be a good book for you. But particularly when it concerned Garrett, I didn't understand why they could never get together, especially because we're starting with her propositioning him having a very positive, open reaction to this, to the point that he kisses her, only, spoiler, to find out that they never get together. I think they have a couple fumblings, but in the end, they do not get together. He claims, well, you know I'm in love with you. I'm like, does she though? I can't tell you, because I could not stay focused on this novel. I thought the writing was really poor. I thought it was cheesy. I didn't like, so one thing that I heard once was that your body does not do things on its own. My hand does not reach for things. I reach for things with my hand. but this author loves the disembodied body parts. So her body parts were doing things of their own volition, and it took me out of the story. I just did not like the writing. I didn't think it was very engaging, but I got very tired of, obviously they liked each other, but they wouldn't do anything about it. Always wrong time, wrong place. There was one instance where they were almost at the right place, but he was always dating somebody, so then she would date somebody, and it's that whole trope of, you can't be with somebody if I want to be with you. So when she's like, hey, I know you're trying to make out with me right now, but the guy I'm dating is on his way. So I think the polite thing to do would not to be make out with you on stage when he walks in. It would be for me to break it off with things so that we can then start things. Of course, she's unable to have this convo with Garrett because he gets offended. So then when she does break it off with her guy, who then gaslights her, and she goes to Garrett's apartment only to learn that he's gotten back with his ex-girlfriend, at least in the capacity that they're spending the night together. I don't know where it went from there because I truly didn't care. I didn't start skipping there, but I was not invested in their storyline enough, so whatever. It just, this back and forth for me wasn't cutting it. I wanted to know why when he leans in and he kisses her on her 30th birthday and he's like, why don't we start now? Why didn't they start now? It is a good cliffhanger. It is something that could propel me to continue to listen, except it took forever because we kept switching back and forth. But that's the deal with Garrett, is never the right place at the right time. He's always dating somebody, or she's always dating somebody, but now it is her 35th birthday. We do know also early on that she apparently had confessed her feelings for him, to which he ghosted her. And the next thing we know, 35th birthday, she has gone to a Dave Matthews Band concert. She looks across the way and she sees Garrett. She goes to approach him. I'm making my move. He reciprocates the kiss, only to pull away to tell her that he's engaged. So when she opens her heart to him, he couldn't tell her that he was engaged. That's just not one of my favorite plot devices, especially because I didn't feel like they had any chemistry and I didn't really care for her. The other thing that we are learning here is that she has a best friend named Summer, who I really enjoyed. I liked Summer. Summer had gumption. Summer was really interesting. It was kind of annoying that Summer was everything Maggie was not. But because Summer was so real, I didn't actually mind. Maggie wants a child. A little bit of a spoiler here. This was the devastating news she had gotten on her 30th birthday, was that she wasn't going to be able to have kids. I wish we'd gotten more about this. It's sprinkled throughout, like the child theme is sprinkled throughout, but we don't dive into it in the way that I thought we should, considering how important it became at the end. But Summer is in the opposite situation where her partner wants a child, but Summer doesn't, and you get little hints that Summer's not really into it, but she won't tell her partner. This is something that I only learned, thankfully, because there was a little bit of a recap at the end, but I missed because I skipped it. She and her partner end up getting divorced because Summer does not want a child. Again, I thought we needed to explore that a little bit more. I'm sure there was some exploration that I skipped over, but in the beginning, we needed more. Just something to keep me engaged. So they're at odds, where Summer has the money to have a child, whereas Maggie does not. So Maggie's the one who wants it, but Maggie's the one who can't have it. Summer's the one who doesn't want it, but she can have it. So we go through this whole Garrett thing where he's engaged, but he's in love with Maggie, and blah, 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 blah. In the meantime, we meet Asher. Asher is Maggie's first love. I'm glad they eventually got to it, but those two did not work out due to distance. They met when they were high school. They were at the same arts camp. So she's there for singer-songwriting, he's there for acting. I'm just saying, Maggie's a shiksa goddess of some sort, because all it takes is for them to have one encounter and he is smitten. They get together. They are together for 3 years. So her parents, apparently it was like a love for the ages, but the parents didn't work out. I think they broke up when she was about a year, but her mother could never love again because her father had been the love of her life. Doesn't really get along with her mom. She does spend time with her dad growing up, but apparently her dad doesn't really want to be a dad, which is why she then starts going to this camp. But then she is ready and rearing to go with Asher. I think it's like a year or 2 in, and she's like, this is the summer, we're going to sleep together, only for the possibility to arise, and she's like, can't do it. Which, what I hated about Asher, so he was kind of the opposite of Garrett. Garrett is this man's man, whereas Asher is this super hot but sensitive soul. And so whenever something's going on in his life, he's a sick puppy. He will not leave her alone. He follows her around everywhere. It happened when he wanted to say he loved her, and now it's happening again. Her friend has put it in her head that he wants to sleep with her. So even though she came to camp ready to sleep with him, now the idea that maybe he's gonna want to sleep with her that night, she can't do it. They have this encounter, and she's like, we've got to put the brakes on things. I'm not ready to sleep with you. And he was like, was I pressuring you to sleep with me? She goes, well, you've just been following me around all day. And he's like, it's the anniversary of my brother's death. Honestly, I do not know how his brother died, but his brother did die. Now she is getting ready for her spring break, and she wants to go visit Asher, and her mom's like, absolutely not. It creates a standstill, to which Maggie, in retrospect, is like, well, the joke was on my mom because my dad gets me for spring break, and my dad absolutely is gonna let me go to California to visit my boyfriend. Wouldn't you know it, his parents are never there, so they do the deed, and I don't know. I had a very hard time relating to Maggie. I thought she was incredibly whiny, and if I heard about her willowy body one more time, I was going to lose it. We've already seen that she's had Garrett make this promise to her. Well, now we see that she had Asher make this promise to her when they were 17, because she does not want to end up like her mother. It is her 35th birthday. The promise with Asher was that they would find each other the night of her birthday, which has not happened. He has become a famous movie star. What does happen is he has gained the rights to her favorite book. She is incensed because she's like, how dare you get the rights to produce a movie surrounding my favorite book, the book you would not know about if I hadn't introduced it to you when we were teenagers, without telling me. So because Summer is in PR, she says, Summer, I'm gonna call in a favor. I need you to track down Asher Reyes. Turns out Asher is in New York. She goes to this event, they catch eyes, they have their moment, and he's like, well, why do you think that we had the press release the fact that I had the rights to this book on your 35th birthday? I just can't. They're getting all loved up, and I did. As cheesy as I thought Asher was, like, as I just don't do a real effeminate man. I like when a guy can be in touch with his feelings, when he can open up, when he's not the alpha male, but he was just too emotional for me, too perfect for me. They're connecting, but they can't really connect because she says, I want to do the music for this film. She is still trying to become a musician. Garrett has kind of given up the dream. Garrett came from money. His dad is now saying, look, kid, you gotta grow up. And I think he's in finance, and there's just no time to do this little hobby, so he's basically given up. She has not. She did have one opportunity where she was able to be the opening act for a band one summer. Of course, the hot band photographer's like, let's get it on. So then they have this affair all summer, to which she's expecting to have it left there, but he's like, I just can't. I love you too much. We need to keep this going. So that he comes to New York with her, even though he hates New York, because she's a chick's a goddess. She's got a willowy body. Men can't say no to her. She's a dynamo between the sheets, apparently. This makes Garrett mad because how dare she be happy with somebody, even though he's dating somebody? I really don't like those kinds of storylines. There was another moment in which she was involved, I think his name was Wiley, got involved with a producer of some sort. Turns out he was a major jerkwad. Things did not go down well. Now she's like, I am the perfect person to create the music for this movie. He says, it's not really up to me. You've got to audition in front of this other guy. The other guy, stamp of approval. She then gets a PR rep, and the PR rep says, this is how we're going to spin it, because Asher shows up to one of her open mics. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, Asher Reyes is in love with this new singer-songwriter. And so the PR person is like, so here's the deal. This story is going to go one of two ways. One, you got your big break because you were boinking the movie star. Or two, you guys fell in love because you worked on the movie together. And she's like, actually, it's neither of those. He and I were in love when we were teenagers, and then we found each other again because this is my favorite novel. And she's like, I like that story, but we should probably get you established before any of this goes on, before people start associating you with him romantically. This is around the time that I stopped caring, because even though the guys were polar opposites, the stories were the same. And I stopped caring. I stopped caring about bouncing back and forth between her timelines because it was the same drama over and over and over. We fast forward. She is having to decide between Asher and Garrett. Apparently, something happens. And so she runs to Garrett, who is getting married. And she's like, console me. They have a moment at which point she realizes she should not take it any further. So she puts the brakes on things, sends him on his way. She goes to Asher and she's like, hey, you're my one. I read a review that was very misleading. And so I did have this in my head, and it was making me very angry. Hold on, let me go back a minute. The whole thing about the pregnancy, when she starts to gain traction because the movie does well, the soundtrack does well, she is making some money. She does end up, like, that producer that she had an issue with, apparently he tried things with other female artists, and now they have brought him down, so she's being heralded as this great person. She has this money now. She goes to a new doctor, and this new doctor is like, well, it won't be easy, but I think you could have kids. So she says, that's great. Let me go and talk to my partner, and then we'll get back to you. She hops over, and this is like 7 months later. She hops over to Asher, and he's like, what? And I'm telling you, this is second to last chapter of the book. And he says, I don't want to have kids. The whole thing with my brother, because I guess maybe his brother died of some kind of a disease, and he was so scarred by the loss of his brother that he doesn't want to put himself in the position to have it happen again by having children. So he says, I don't want to have kids. So they break up. And this other reviewer said, I could not believe that they waited till the very end for these two characters to have this conversation, just for them to break up, and then her choose Garrett. I'm sitting here fuming because I'm like, why does this girl get to have both guys? Why this whole novel? And at least at this point, we are being led to believe Asher is her one. The writer even says, when Maggie rejects Garrett, when she finally says, hey, this is not going to work, like, you're not my one, that she is not sitting next to her soulmate, she's sitting next to the one who got away. I'm just thinking, why does she have her cake and eat it too? Why does she get to have two men? With this idea in the back of my head that she's going to end up with Garrett in the end, I'm so mad because I'm like, she just needs to decide. Like, we just need a resolution. I'm so tired of the ping pong between the two, especially because, in my opinion, Garrett is toxic. He is not a good option. Well, this person's review was wrong, because then Maggie goes through, she gets artificially inseminated, she has a baby. 2 years later, and this is all in the last chapter, 2 years later, Asher pops back up. She's at a coffee shop, and all of a sudden, there he is. Apparently, he had seen her a couple days earlier, a couple weeks earlier. He'd gotten his manager, to find out where she lived, and she lives in the general vicinity of this coffee shop. So he essentially stalked this coffee shop until she shows back up. It might sound sweet. Personally, I thought it was disturbing. And he says, I'm ready to commit, children or no children. They live happily ever after. But I did have that in my head, and it had me fuming, because if she in fact had ended up with Garrett, that would have been one of those biggest lies, and I don't jive with that. I completely understand why we don't write books that in the end are dreams. We don't mislead the reader only to then turn it around like, haha, just kidding. The reader doesn't like that. So I was glad that she did end up with Asher. I saw a response. In the Reddit forum, somebody did say, well, it took me and my significant other this amount of time to talk about children, like years and years and years. And so it's valid. You know, it's not that they had to have talked about children, but for the sake of the book, it was important that they'd had that conversation earlier. And even though I did skip almost half the book, judging by that review, it seems that it had not been discussed. So I thought it was important that they would have talked about it a little earlier. I thought it could have created a little bit more point of contention. Personally, I couldn't tell you what their point of contention was. Her problems with Garrett were that they could never be together. So what was the problem with her and Asher? Was it that they couldn't move as quickly as they wanted to just due to her career and the demands of her image? I don't know. This novel, let me read you my issues. The writing. Let me give you some more examples. I wish I had more, but we are probably all going to be glad that I didn't start making my list sooner. But it wasn't until, so I told you about the disembodied body parts doing things of their own volition. This was really what it got. She seared her eyes into him. She seared her eyes into him? What kind of writing is that? It felt like Greenberg was trying really hard to say things in a different way, which I appreciate, but they've got to make sense. And this is probably why I don't do romance. I wanted to read this book as a comp title because it's something of a journey of self for Maggie, which I did not see much development in Maggie at all. She started out as whiny, being unable to have healthy relationships, and then she basically ended as whiny and unable to have a healthy relationship until the very last chapter. I just can't do romance because I think romance is super cliched. I would really like a little bit more depth and realism, and that's not what I got from this novel. But some other little examples of this poor writing. I've already told you about her willowy body. I mean, Who describes their body as willowy? I have never, in a conversation, granted, I don't have a willowy body. I do have an athletic body. And I have had conversations where I'm like, well, I have more of an athletic body type. But I don't say, I wrapped my athletic body around him. My athletic body was entwined with his. I don't do that. And that's what she would say. She says, my chest engulfed the mirror ball. So I think they were at a bar or a club or something, and there's a mirror ball overhead, and her chest engulfed the mirror ball. I don't know what that means, but I'd love for you to tell me. Her lips were drowning on his. Again, I don't know what that means. He was pinning her swelling body. Was she pregnant? Were her ankles swelling? What does she mean, her swelling body? Is she decomposed? What does she mean he pinned her swelling body? Was she swelling with emotion? Was she swelling with desire? There's a different way to convey that image. His chest thumped in front of her eyes. Is he breathing heavily? Is his chest heaving? Is she seeing his heart beating out of his chest? I can get her chest was thumping because she can feel it. But what does it mean that his chest was thumping in front of her eyes? Oh, this is a good one. She lowered her watery gaze. We see that a lot, but there was a lot of water behind the lashes, water under my eyes. Just say you were crying. Just say it. And finally, she opened her lashes. Not she opened her eyes, but she opened her lashes. You're not opening your lashes. You're opening your eyes. Your lashes are attached to your eyes. You did not open your lashes. You didn't. This book, I'm just losing, guys. Like, I cannot seem to win. But because those other two were automatic DNFs, and then the one that I'm going to film after this, but I read before this, was atrocious. I'm really trying to persevere here, and it is not working out in my favor. Overall, I found her unrelatable. I wanted to relate to her because guy woes, they're real. I think why I liked Asher more was I could understand the relationship more. They get together, they stay together, but then they can't be together because now they're both off at college, and the demands on their time and the distance between them just makes it unfeasible for them to be together. They both recognize it, whether they like it or not. That's just how it's going to be. And, you know, if something brings them back together, it brings them back together. She's not sitting there pining for him. I mean, she is, but she isn't. But now she's got Garrett. I think what really got me, I'm not 100% able to say this, I think whenever she laid herself out before him and then he ghosts her and then she confronts him about it, I think this is when he says, but you knew I loved you. Either it wasn't there and then it was later in the portion that I skipped. Nothing is addressed as of, I didn't know you loved me. We can assume, based off things that Summer said or based off of their interactions, that there is a mutual attraction, but how did we know? How did she know he loved her? Because he's not man enough to actually do anything about it when he can. And my other issue here is, even though he's in love with Maggie, he's unwilling or able to break off his engagement with his fiancée. Yet, when she runs to him in her emotional moment, he's willing to move forward with her emotionally and physically. Are we grown-ups? Sometimes we have to do the hard thing. And the hard thing could have been break up with the fiancé. Disagree with me if you want. That's absolutely fine. But my train of thought is, if any part of him is in love with another woman, he needs needs to work that part out before he gets married. Call me old-fashioned. There we go. That is maybe once, maybe twice. Absolutely do not recommend it, but I would like to know your recommendations for good romance books or good books about a journey of self, something that maybe straddles the YA women's fiction, the chick lit kind of realm. I don't want something that's too mature, nothing literary fiction, something that's fun and easy and relatable. Have a great day. Bye!